Get rolling. Are you all ready to start?
Sure.
Okay. Let's light this candle. Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are so glad you are here with us, and just by showing up, you are already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I am pleased to feature two of the busiest, most connected, and most effective music executives in the entire industry. I promise you will leave today smarter and more inspired than you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and please make some new ones. And ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those as possible during the interview. Also, please make sure your chat is set to address everyone, not just the speakers. I want to thank our sponsors for without their support, we could not keep this series free. Thank you to First Horizon Bank, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Tennessee Brew Works, Project Music, Cushmaster's brand of CBD products, and also want to introduce a brand new sponsor to our lineup, MedJet. MedJet is the top-rated medical transport and travel security program for people who travel extensively. Also want to give a special shout out to my friend David Hazen for his help in pulling together his dream team pairing of guests. Thanks again, David. Your work is always appreciated here. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome back a good friend and Who Knew alumnus, Neeta Ragoowansi. Neeta has been an attorney and music business professional for over 25 years, serving as a strategic advisor, business development resource, and legal counsel to entertainment and tech industry clients. She is senior counsel of legal and business affairs for Global Citizen, president of Music Managers Forum, a global co-chair for Women in Music, diversity chair for the American Bar Association's Forum on the Entertainment and Sports Industries, and co-founder of NPREX. Prior to that, Neeta was founding head of artist label relations for Sound Exchange, VP of business dev and legal for TuneSat, assistant general counsel for the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, and a former board governor for 10 plus years of the Recording Academy. Neeta also serves on the advisory boards of International Music Managers Forum, Gritty in Pink, IFR, SIM, San Paulo, and the South by Southwest Conference. Neeta has served as a panelist speaker at over 300 music industry conferences, including global music business, legal and copyright topics, as well as women's and leadership and empowerment. In all her spare time, she is a performing musician with the band Oxymorons and has earned first prize in the rock category at the Mid-Atlantic Songwriting Competition, as well as an honorable mention in Billboard Songwriting Contest. Did I mention that she's very busy? Welcome, Neeta. So glad to have you. And joining Neeta as today's featured guest, we are thrilled to welcome Ariel Hyatt. Ariel runs Cyber PR Music, an artist development, social media, and content strategy firm based in New York City. Her agency just celebrated 25 years in business, and she and her team of women who get stuff done run digital PR campaigns and advise on how to create online influence and release impactful projects. She has spoken in 12 countries to over 100,000 entrepreneurs and is the author of 5 best-selling books on social media, marketing, crowdfunding, including her most recent release, The Ultimate Guide to Music Publicity, which went to #1 on Amazon in the music business category. She proudly serves on the boards of Women in Music and Sweet Relief Musicians Fund and is a graduate of Leadership Music. Please welcome these two rock stars to the smartest people in the room. Take it away, Neeta.
Thank you, Tom. I'm like, after all that bio reading, I'm like, do you need some oxygen? That was right. Take a breath. Thank you so much for that. And hello, everyone. I am Neeta Ragoowansi, and it is such a pleasure to be here. I love seeing all these names of all these great friends out there, and we really are a community. And Rachel, you said out there on the comments, it says so much that past panelists come back as attendees. And I'm seeing that, and it really does. And Tom, you're doing a great job, you and your team. And it is such a pleasure that you've been able to contribute this amazing amount of programming that we get to see on the YouTube channel if we've missed it. And it's great to see it out there. So thank you for all you do. And Miss Ariel Hyatt, what a joy to have you here. My dear old friend of, gosh, what is it, 20 plus years? So Ariel, personal dear friend, hugely, deeply, I have deep respect for her professionally, personally. And, she's an inspiring human being. She really, really is thoughtful and enlightened and provides such backbone to everything she does. It comes from a real place of heart and work, and she's passionate about what she does. And she's always giving back, and she's always thinking innovatively. And she's really, really worked towards helping us out with women in music with a variety of causes. And so I applaud you, Ariel, and it's such an honor to be able to talk to you today and have our community get to know you that much better. Although I know everyone out there probably knows Miss Fabulous Ariel Hyatt. So welcome, Ariel. How do we start? Gosh, let's start at the beginning. Let's start in New York, New York. We had this lovely chance to catch up after a little bit of pandemic downtime and meet up in New York, New York. What did your beginnings look like for you? And what do you think were your particularly formative, what were those formative happenings for the path you've taken?
So yeah, I was raised in Manhattan. I was born in the Berkshires by accident because I was a couple months early, but raised in New York City during the 80s, which that was the New York City that is not the New York City that we see today. And it was an amazing place to grow up. Amazing in that it offered freedom. At a young age, I was out and about around the city. It offered a global perspective. You take the subway in New York, you take a bus in New York, you walk into Central Park in New York, and you're keenly aware of there are other people with different religions, and they look different, and they are different. And it was a time where great things were happening: art, music. I was brought up in an amazing apartment. My parents are artists, so we lived on the West Side, and it was a very precious and cool time. And I think when I look at the trajectory of my career, being raised in a house full, my dad is a filmmaker, my mom is an entrepreneur. But a very wildly creative entrepreneur, so very artistic.
She has some amazing books, doesn't she?
Yes, also a self-help writer. So the apple did not fall far from the tree. So it was very cool, and they were out and about. My parents were and are still culture vultures. So both of them were theater majors. I was also a theater major.
As was I.
So theater was sort of in the household and in my blood, and there was always a lot of fascinating people coming and going, and my parents were always running off to theater and talking about theater, and there were actors and performers and interesting people always coming and going. So that's in my DNA, artists. And then my dad is this creative filmmaker and was working at CBS. He then worked for Channel 13, where he won an Emmy when I was young. And
Amazing.
the blueprint for sort of what ended up happening to me in my career was my dad was a struggling filmmaker. Film, just like music, had a enormous shift in how it was made and delivered when my dad was at the top of his game. Just like we've all seen in the music industry, the way that we knew the business ran totally got upended. And I think from a young age, I realized that if you were not adaptable, like my dad was, worked at CBS, and everything was provided for, and they used to shoot on film, and there was catering, and every CBS television show that my dad wrote and shot and produced was like an enormous feature film. And then of course video came in, and then film school came in, and all these younger people who knew how to edit video came in, and his life changed dramatically because he couldn't adapt. So I very much have this empathy for watching our musician community being forced consistently to adapt and adapt and adapt. Every few years, we have to learn a whole new set of tools and things. And I watched my dad really suffer. He went into depression, and awful things happened, and he got frozen because he couldn't adapt. So my desire to help artists, I think, comes from having a unique purview. And then the second thing I'll say is I was also living with my mom, married to my dad, only kid, small family. And my mom was a pioneering entrepreneurial businesswoman. She had 60 employees at a time where
Wow.
that was so unusual for women that her brother had to sign the lease on her office. This is when I was little. This is not a long time ago.
Pre-1974,
Yeah,
right? We
because
didn't have
women-
legislation.
Yeah, women were not allowed to sign leases in Midtown Manhattan in the 70s. I mean, you think about how far we've come. So there was my mother with her brother's name on her lease and 65 employees. And she realized she was doing something quite unique in that she was a female business owner with employees in the 70s. And she wanted to give back to other women. So that's what prompted her. And I think I took a page from her book, was if you're going to go do something, contributing to your community and sort of showing them how you did it or how it can be done is a really great way to travel the world and meet people and share your knowledge.
Sure. Well, there are two themes that you've picked up on there, and I want to make sure we get to them, which is about women in music and about the current plight of artists. But before that, I want to kind of stick to our chronology for a moment, get that fabulous Ariel history in here. You grew up in New York, and then you left. You went out west. What happened there, and why? Why would you leave New York?
Okay. My mom said I wasn't allowed to go to college any further than a 3.5-hour drive from New York City. So I went to Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is the armpit of New England. If you've never been there. And I took a visiting semester in college at UC Boulder. And the reason why I did that was my little university in Worcester, Massachusetts did not have a dance department, and I was very interested in theater and dance. They also did not have a journalism department, and I was interested in PR and journalism. So I went out to Boulder to study both dance and PR. And because I was already, from growing up, going to CBGBs and Limelight and all of the amazing nightclubs in and around New York, Tramps, the Wetlands, I immediately was drawn to this little theater on the hill near campus called the Fox. And my first week visiting semester Boulder, I ended up there alone because I was a visiting senior. I didn't have any friends yet in Boulder. And I walked into this music venue and I fell in love. It was amazing, small, intimate. The sound was perfect. And you didn't have to buy tickets 58 years in advance, as you did in New York, anytime you wanted to see anything, because that's the way a large city works. And I fell in love. I fell in love with Boulder. I fell in love with the people. I fell deeply in love with the music scene and the bands that were performing there. And I got bit by the bug.
Yes, we all.
So
Right. So how did you, professionally, is that where you got into PR?
it is, it
Uh,
is. So after graduating, I did what many of us, maybe not many of us, but definitely many of us now do. And I moved back in with my parents. They were less than thrilled. And after a bunch of really weird semi-paid and unpaid internships at WNEW-FM, working for Catherine Schenker in her publicity department, um, I finally found a little tiny record label in New York City that was called What Are Records, run by
Yeah.
the amazing Rob Gordon.
Rob.
I got a job with What Are, and What Are Records moved out to Boulder. And
Mm,
so I accomplished my young life dream of living in Boulder and working in the music business. So that's where I got my start at What Are Records.
yeah. And then you ventured out on your own.
I did.
What was that called? I remember your fabulous cards back in the day.
Yeah. So from What Are, I had an opportunity to be the PR lead at a concert promotions company. It was a very short-lived 1 year at Small Axe, which was a division of Fay Line.
Mhm.
And I did not love concert promotion, but I wanted to still be in and around Boulder. So when that job ended, I started my own company, and I named it after myself because in my young career, I had already felt stymied and felt like nobody was listening to me. At label meetings, all the guys would shout over me. At Small Axe, all the men thought I was just the cute little publicist. And I named it Ariel Publicity because I wanted people to know that it was my company and I had something to say. So it was not a very creative name, but there it was. And I printed up little orange business cards at Kinko's at 3 a.m. And I launched my business in 1996 at South by Southwest.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Is that where I met you? Could
A
have
couple
been.
years later, yes.
Those orange cards were fabulous. They always stuck out in the pile. And then I got to know the amazing work that you were doing. And so building a business, being an entrepreneur, how did
Yeah,
that feel?
at 24. I mean, it didn't feel hard because I came from a family where that wasn't hard. It was, and I love when you read about entrepreneurs and how they get started and their trajectories. Oftentimes, successful entrepreneurs come from entrepreneurial families. And that makes a lot of sense because you don't have parents saying, well, you should be a doctor, a lawyer, do something safe, work at a school, get a, so I didn't have fear around launching my own business. And I loved it. The day I launched Ariel Publicity at South by, I came back from Austin, and immediately the Fox Theater called and said, can we be your client? So they were my client for 5 years, 5 glorious years of being in-house PR for that venue. And then all of the touring artists that I had worked with from around Boulder, Acoustic Junction, so many others, they came to me, and it was so nice. So it was very homespun. And what was very cool about that was those bands were all over. They were hitting the road and they were touring. So I got my chops really quickly as a tour publicist, on the road with a ton of bands.
Amazing. On the road. And but you got innovative on us. And I know that technology was starting to really push all of us into a certain direction at a certain time period. But
Yeah,
cyber PR, I want you to just tell us that story there, because you were ahead of your time, girl. Completely.
it was. So I think working for all of these independent artists who were touring and making a lot of money on the road, that was the What Are Records model. My clients were very much the canary in the coal mine when mp3.com came. And then Napster came, and I was beginning to see, oh my gosh, something really bad is happening here. Like all of a sudden, music is somehow getting spread all over the place and for free, and that didn't look so good. And then I also, I'll never forget the day I called one of my tiny little newspapers in a tertiary market, because I had an artist coming through town, and I said, "Hey, would you interview whoever artist?" And this tiny little reporter in a small newspaper said, "I'm sorry, but I'm interviewing Elton John." And I said, "Oh, that's weird." And I realized that the secret had gotten out of, like, you can make a lot of money on the road. And there were more and more and more artists kind of following that model of stay out on the road. And then I started noticing newspapers were like, all of a sudden there was always a jazz editor and a classical editor and a pop music guy at every single newspaper. And then sometimes there was additionally like a gay editor, LGBTQ plus at that time was called, like the gay community person. And like those people started either leaving the newspaper, or one person was all of a sudden doing all those jobs. So those were indicators that bad things were happening. And the other thing that was happening was my phone was ringing all the time, and it was independent musicians that were confused. They didn't quite know what publicity was. And I was all day long answering questions about, well, what is PR? Are you publishing? I'm like, no, I know it starts with PUB, but it's different. And I realized artists were very uneducated about exactly what even a publicist did, but they knew they needed one, so they were calling me. So I was spending hours of my week on the phone with all of these artists who were just calling me. So that prompted me to do two things. Thing number one was build a website, and I began to put educational articles about, like, this is what PR is. And I could say to those sweet artists who called, hey, come to my website, I explain it all there. And then at the other side of the house, I got really interested in internet marketing, because I noticed that with Napster and mp3.com, artists were really beginning to miss out on an opportunity that I saw. And that was that they could build email lists and they could build websites. And there were all these, as those newspapers began to interview Elton John, I had to go somewhere because I had dozens and dozens of artists that still needed publicity. And I started finding webzines. And there were all these like great music fans online writing webzines, which had come from a world I was very familiar with, being in the niche music PR business, which was fanzines. So a lot of the fanzine editors had gone online and they were writing webzines. And then I don't know how many of you are this old, but we'd be clicking around, notice that webzines were all connected in web rings. And I started building a digital database. And those were the early iterations of what became cyber PR.
And cyber PR built this platform that you could also take in, I guess, scale the amount of independent artists who needed publicity, which was damn innovative. It was great, when I was talking to artists, to know that I'm like, cyber PR, you can go there and get a bazillion bloggers, I guess is the terminology. After webzines, we started saying bloggers, and started using the blogging community. It's great. And there's so much innovation inside of that, which I want you to get to when we start talking about your amazing book, and books. But let's go back to concepts, important things that are near and dear to your heart. I'm going to switch over gears to women in music. You've been an inspiring advocate, and I kind of want to know from your angle, I know the why for me. What is the why for you, and where do you feel our women in music are today? But go for the why first.
Why?
Why?
Oh, it's a good question. When I was graduating from Clark University with my degree in theater, and I marched into the office that was supposed to help you with your career, the career counseling office, a week before graduation. And I said, I want to be in the music industry. And they all looked, and like all three people there looked at me like I was insane. I realized, wow, there's no one here that's going to help me. I'm going to have to figure out how to help myself. So writing all those articles, the why was, we all need help and guidance. And if we can't get it, it's not going to work out. We're not going to be able to pull ourselves up. Why women? I came to that at a really interesting time. I was building my business, and sometimes I had men working for me and sometimes women and sometimes both. And I'll never forget it. I went in New York at Gonzalez E. Gonzalez, and I was speaking for Dub Spot. And it was an all women's community of DJs and producers. And I looked around the room and I realized, this is really unusual. This is the first time I've spoken, and I had been speaking consistently since 2007. This must have been around 2010, 11. And it was all women. And I felt like I could finally truth tell and breathe. And we had a really amazing conversation that day. And that was the day I realized I have choices. I can employ men or women or both. And I started, every time a man would quit or leave or move on or go to work at some massive company in the music industry, when they left my agency, I hired a woman to replace. So now we are a team of 100% women. And I really only like to hire women. I will read men's resumes, but we are a team of we are a team of women who get, as Tom so nicely said, stuff done. It doesn't say stuff on my website. And I realized also my commitment to helping and educating has brought me into a lot of classrooms full of young men and young women. I had an Obama grant at MTSU and helped write the curriculum, which became Cyber PR. It was actually named for me. That was such a huge honor. And I've spoken at so many schools, and there's usually several women who either pull me aside after I speak or email me, and they say, you know, you really inspired me. And I that's my why. That's my why. I had my mother who really inspired me, but I didn't have a lot of, I had one female mentor in the music industry. Shout out to Sarah Vale, who to this day is an amazing agent and still working. But aside from her, there was not one woman in my life who was like really mentoring me in the business.
Right.
So being that guiding light is my why.
It's beautiful. And is your why turning into ideas for solutions? Because I know we all see the challenges, but I feel like you've been putting out solutions. Hiring practices is certainly an important part of it. Workplace environment, not having a toxic workplace environment is so crucial. And I think as a business owner and as a leader, you've been doing that. But anything else that as you watch the women's movements happen and inside our music industry, where do you think we need to go?
I mean, Robert Singerman, shout out. There's people that are actually here who have been major champions, David Hazen. There are men in our lives that I think if men can just be a little bit more aware of, I have a choice here. I can have 5 interns. What if half of them were women? I have choices around who gets to be in the room and who gets to sit at the table. Having cheerleaders, having people who help bring you up through the ranks is incredibly important. So I think there's that. There's also when you think about like women trying to make it in this business, you know, I spoke at the Clive Davis School just last week over Zoom, and one of the young women asked me, like, her first question out of the gate after I gave a whole presentation about this is what I do. She's like, have you ever experienced like harassment or anything really bad happening to you? And I felt like, wow, that's a bizarre, I mean, that's a weird question for the first question. And
Mm.
I answered her, and the answer was yes. And in the 80s and 90s, growing up around concert promoters and working at WNEW, you can imagine.
I can.
Yes,
Hard for the
you know,
course.
the answer was yes. And it also was normalized.
It was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're just sort of like, okay, you know, you grow up in New York and men catcall at you on the street. Thank God I'm old enough now that it doesn't happen to me anymore. It just felt like you leave your house and that's like a normal day in your life, is like men hollering at you on the street. So then it wasn't that unusual when you then got in your office and someone said something off color in your office. And it was the normalizing of that. And this is why I really, really love Gen Z, and they really are conscious about what is appropriate versus what is not appropriate versus where their boundaries are. And I love that in today's young women. They're not putting up with, I mean, I don't know that any of us put up with it. It just felt weirdly like,
No, I think we did. If I have to look at
yeah,
Gen Z
sort of,
versus
yeah.
our generation, I would say we put up with a lot. We did. And I look back and go, as I try to work through women in music issues, is I wish I had not done that letting go of stuff myself, of stuff. There's that word again. But and I love what you talked about, male allies, and having male allies helping with the women's movement and initiatives. I also think it's important for men to talk to men, for there to be men sort of setting the pace for other men in terms of what is the right environment in that sort of intra-gender discussion, or, and it can be done in very small ways, but it's about setting that sort of pace, right? It's about calling out someone when you see bad behavior, or, whatever it may be. So thank you for sharing that, Ariel. And it's, I know it's an important plight. And it's getting better, right? Getting better.
I do think it's getting better. Also, it's interesting I've made up my own career from a very young age. Like, I don't have a boss. I don't have, I see often in structures where you're scared that you could lose your job. It's harder to kind of carve out your own path. But one of my employees, Jamie Albarisi, who left recently after several years at my company, the night she left, we threw a little Zoom party for her. She said, the one thing I love about you as my boss is you always stuck your claws out and your neck out for me. And you never threw me under the bus, and you protect your team. And I would say that is a quality. When she said that, I felt really proud that that's how I'm looked at as a boss. I often, I have a mantra some days, and the mantra is, it's PR, not ER, which I got from Molly Bokenhide, who was one of my young publicists a couple of years ago. And I love that, because I think when you get into it and everything feels so important and huge and big, you have to take a step back and go, what are we really doing here? None of us are curing cancer for a living. Days can be really intense. Things can feel really bad, but with a little bit of pause and breathing room, it's normally not as you think it is. And so that's another thing that is the solution to helping people come up through this industry, is supporting them.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, how do you feel about what artists are going through currently? I mean, it is a demanding world, and it's challenging. And, what's important to you as we each work with them from day to day. So many of our folks here, right? We work on artist teams, we work around artists, we're helping them through, or sometimes not helping them, but telling them, where to put the pause and the caution and all that too. The lawyer speaking.
we're coming from, okay, this is an unprecedented time, right? We're into year 2 of livelihoods got taken away, right? Artists that made money in studio, on the road, that is still tenuous. Then we had something that's been going on for years now, which is artists that used to sell shiny circular discs in plastic boxes and or other things. They're not making the money they used to make. That is no secret that we're making quarters of pennies on the dollar, right? So this is impacting artists along with social media. And social media, I don't need to tell anyone here, has been proven to make us all feel worse about ourselves. That is the truth. It is wonderful in that we can connect with friends far and wide, and we can see people that we might have lost touch with, what they're up to, and feel connected. But then there is this horrible other thing at play, which is people only put up, obviously, it always looks better on social. So it's causing so much anxiety and stress and upset. And artists are now being put upon. You are supposed to be posting hundreds of times a month across every social channel, or else you're looked at as lazy and not wanting to do your job as an artist. And there's, last year's Instagram is this year's TikTok, is next year's who God knows what we're going to get into. And so there's this constant learning curve. And then we've also seen mental health is a huge thing that I'm so glad that we're talking more and more about it. I'm so glad many artists on the charts are brave enough to expose that they have mental health issues, that mental health is part of who they are, because it's finally giving the rest of us permission to acknowledge it. And so I think the thing that we can do as people in the business, no matter what side of the house you're on, is really look for your empathy. I was on a team call today with a label that I work for, and there was a call yesterday, and one of our team members didn't look so good and was acting a little erratic. And he said, I'm really, really, really worried about my team member. I texted the team member, and sure enough, something really horrible had happened that was very personal. And it wasn't for public consumption. Like, you couldn't come onto the call and be like, hey, I have this horrible thing happening. So I think empathy and understanding that we are still in a very hard time. People are still getting sick. People are still dying from COVID. Tours are still getting canceled. Things are happening in the world. You never know what someone else is walking through, right? You just never know. So I think if we can all muster a little bit of empathy and go a little bit easier on where anyone is at. Some people still fully masked, some people acting like it's 1999 and party no problem. Everybody has a comfort level that's perfect for who they are and where they are right now. But this has been a really hard couple of years. I mean, so many artists have lost their incomes and have had to shift and figure out. And many of us have also had to do that in our businesses as an industry. How are we shifting? How are we recalibrating as all of the new things come up and happen? And I don't just mean the pandemic, I mean technology, right? I mean, anyone that's in marketing and has been in marketing for more than 2 or 3 years, the way that we market is completely different. Just like lawyers, the way your contracts look really different. We all are experiencing the need to adapt. And so I think part of what we can do, aside from help our next generation understand how to navigate and specifically help women, is have a lot of empathy for our artists. Mm-hmm. It is so easy for me some days to be like, oh, why can't this artist just fill in the blank, post 1,000 times a month? Why can't this artist just get me what I ask for? Something is stopping them. Something is happening. It's not that they're dumb. It's just that I think also when you've got a right brain and a left brain and you're more artistically inclined, there's a reason why we in the business support creators. Their job is to create, not to market, promote, negotiate contracts. That's what we're here for. So I think also understanding that.
How do you then approach, an artist has a social media schedule, right? They have this calendar that's put in front of them by their managers, for example, who are only trying to help, right? Who are there to say, remember, here's this, or their marketing PR team saying, here's the calendar, here's how you post, make sure you have TikTok on there, make sure. How do you balance it against that excessive demand for doing that versus going in the studio or wherever to go create, or just have breathing room to think of the next beautiful idea for a song or what have you?
Yeah, so obviously, if you're good at organizing and planning, it's going to be easier to get out ahead of your social media. But I mean, I have deep respect for artists. Sometimes you'll go on their pages and they'll say, you know what, I'm taking a break right now. I'll be back in a month. Sometimes you just need to take a step back. Or if you can afford to outsource it to someone or figure out a way that you're not on it all the time. Because what's predictable is the doom scrolling and the getting sucked down the rabbit hole, which happens to all of us, even on a good day. You go to post a simple thing, or I've even gone to just check in on a friend, like, oh, wonder if my friend landed in the place they said they were going. And then 20 minutes later, I'm like, what was I doing here on Facebook?
Yes.
Yes,
Why did I open my phone up again?
I'm going to see if someone's in Miami, and all of a sudden I'm commenting on, I don't know what, right? So it's very, these tools are designed to suck us in and keep us there, that we know this. So
Sure.
I think I have spoken to and had so many conversations with artists where I say, listen, you're going to set a timer, you're going to program what you're going to post for the week, and you're going to leave it alone, because it's not helping your creative juices. They're not flowing when you're stuck
Yeah.
in
Time
the
management needs to be part of that. Like they go together. You can't have one without the other in a way. So, that leads me to your book, The Ultimate Guide to Music Publicity, your latest amazing book. Just give me a little bit on that. What speaks to the readers? What makes it meaningful for them? What's happening in there that's
so
working?
it's a pretentious title, so do forgive me. But yes,
Ultimate.
here we were, it was locked down. I was locked literally in my house in Brooklyn. I had a newborn. I was really scared of the pandemic, and every night at 7 o'clock we would do the shout out for the nurses and the doctors and the people, and the only thing I could hear was sirens. And I realized, if and when we get through all of this, there's not going to be a whole lot of money left over for many, many artists to invest in publicity. That is a luxury that many cannot afford. Good publicists are expensive and they earn their money. It's hard to do music publicity. So I set out to write a guide, and I started at the PR List, which is a community of around probably 500 music publicists. And we are on there all day long. It's a Google group, and we talk to each other about, anyone know what happened to this writer? Or does anyone know someone here? Or I'm looking for someone's manager. Can someone help? And it's a community of people, very much like Women in Music Google group. Hey, I need a name, an address. Does anyone know what happened to? Here's an article to share, like that. So I went up and said, hey, I'm thinking of writing this book. Give me your best nuggets. And 65 publicists wrote from their hearts to me their best advice. And I took a few quotes, and in some cases, one quote from each of those 65 hardworking music publicists, also music journalists, bloggers, playlisters, podcasters. I kind of got both sides of the table in the
Nice.
PR world. And then I looked for stories, and I had 12 independent musicians give me their stories about how they do their own PR, whether that's in real life, whether that's how they go out and get articles placed for themselves. It's how they did something in their career by leveraging something wonderful or terrible that happened to them. And so there's 12 full profiles of artists. So this book really is the ultimate guide because it's a community book. It's a book that is not just me saying, here's how to do PR. It's 65 music publicists and people who do this all day long, and 12 hardworking, very successful artists, including Michelle Schacht, who's
No way.
the household name. And I loved putting this book together because I really got to think about what's the journey of publicity? How would I break it down even more granularly than I have over the years in my music blogging? And it was a real pleasure to put together. And it's the only book of its kind that's actually only dedicated to music PR. There's a lot of books that have music publicity as like one chapter or one section of a more broad music book. And then, of course, there are a couple of music publicity textbooks, which are being taught at music programs. But I loved putting this book together. I designed the cover myself. I had fun doing it. And I'm really pleased with the responses I've been getting. People have been feeling really inspired by the artists that are featured in it. And if anyone knows me, you know I love action sheets and worksheets and exercises. So of course it's packed with, here's how you do publicity from soup to nuts.
Amazing. A DIY, helping your what is it, helping artists to run you out of business by giving them the tools and the tricks of the trade. I mean, 65 different publicists giving you their greatest nuggets, or I mean, that's incredible. That's amazing. And it's so useful. And it's so useful to go through individual journeys of artists to get that profile, to be the fly on the wall as to what others do. It's super great. So yeah, thank you. Glad you found some time to write that because we're all so busy. So there's so much to talk about with you, and I'm so enjoying this. Folks, if you have any questions for Ariel, feel free to pour them into either the chat or the Q&A, and we'll scroll through. So moving on, the future, Ariel. Where are we going and what's exciting to you now?
Where are we going? I'm really interested in continuing our conversation with all artists and industry about monetization. How are we making money as a creative community? And, you know, a lot of light gets shown on, well, this artist has 5 million of this or 10 million of that or 1 billion. The White Stripes just passed 1 billion streams for Seven Nation Army. And that's not normal, right? That's not what the rest of us get to experience mostly. So as always, I am interested in a stronger middle class of creators. How can artists put time and love and energy into one or two things that will help them to put more money in their pockets? That's a conversation. I'm actually about to write a whole new series about live streaming. Now that we're through the lockdown, everybody's live streaming. I think live streaming is here to stay. I also think that we are only at our very, very beginning as far as what it potentially can do, as far as providing. We've got obviously Web 3.0 and Meta coming, so live streaming with headsets on. We also have some of the largest brands and experiences and activations happening with shopping in live streams and what that looks like. That will all eventually trickle down to independent creators. Obviously, the hot thing to talk about right now is NFTs. What independent artists who are not household names are going to be able to profit off of NFTs? That's interesting. So consistently having the conversations about what is putting shekels in pockets. And I think we've proven that, you know, having millions and millions of likes and spending countless hours choosing filters for your Instagram posts might not be the best use of your monetization scaling time. So that's where I like to spend time. Also, always going back to basics. It always is amazing to me how when artists come to me for strategy, because we don't only do publicity, we also build long-term plans here,
Mhm.
how few artists have really taken the time to write themselves a marketing plan. All successful businesses start with marketing plans. All successful, even CEOs of companies, have goals that they set for themselves. Okay, this year, this is what we're going to do. And I'm amazed often that artists, and it's not their fault, it's that we're in this constant reaction. I got a TikTok, I got an Instagram, I've got, I have to be, oh no, we have to release a song every month because that's what Spotify said to do. And that's what or else everyone's going to forget. How can you possibly get out ahead of yourself and
Mhm.
plan when you're in pants on fire mode all the time? So I'm interested always in conversations about extinguishing the fire on our pants so that we can breathe and calm down and plan and get out ahead of ourselves.
And get original and get innovative with things, which does take breathing room. Definitely. I love Sally has this great question here. I'm gonna turn to the chat. I'm a mud career classical music composer in Australia, and I'm finding it increasingly difficult to balance my time between my craft and all the social media, newsletters, website, PRS catalog, etc. And at what point should I consider getting professional assistance? And should I outsource or hire someone under my own banner under a casual employment basis? Good question.
I mean, I always say, if you can afford it, absolutely. There are resources, of course, if that's a stretch. You can get an unpaid intern, you can work with, people that are looking to get experience, and, you don't have to hire the number one person in the business to help you with the basics, right? And I also always think about when I was coming up, I was mentored by T. Harv Eker, who wrote The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. And one thing T. Harv always used to say is, get a housekeeper first. What does that mean? That means the 4 hours you spend a week cleaning your toilet and dealing with your dishes and mopping your floors, that's 4 hours of creative time. It might be really hard to find a Spotify playlisting strategist or a YouTube genius or someone who's going to write your newsletters. It is not hard to find someone to come to your house and clean it. So maybe that's the first thing you do to give yourself 4 extra hours a week or a month as your gift to yourself. I know with many artists, bookkeeping, nightmare, learning QuickBooks, like if you're struggling with graphic design, there's this wonderful website called Fiverr, where there are people all over the world who have great vision and can help execute on simple things.
Yeah.
So I do love any kind of tool like that. I have an artist we're working with, and we were struggling with getting a really nice new single art. 99 designs, $200. 36 beautiful pieces of art came back. All we had to do was choose the right one. So there are resources you can always use. You don't have to go to the most expensive. So my answer for you, Sally, is yes, absolutely. Try to outsource so that you can give yourself some breathing room so
Yeah.
that you can, whatever it is you need to do.
Mid-career Sally. I got the mid, not the mud. Reading a little too literal there. My bad. So yeah, and I think the answer on the timing is as soon as you can, when you feel that pressure, right? When you feel the pants on fire and you're feeling it heating up, going past a simmer, it's probably the right time. I think all of us know in our guts, but we don't always listen to our gut, right? About when we're feeling that stress and that pressure, and creation and life in general can't happen with the stress. So yeah, it's about building the team for that, and strategically, right? Building a team when you go, okay, I can only take my career so far. I think I need some other brains in the room, right? A team is there to do work. A team's also there to help you think through and provide some solutions where you may not have thought of everything. So often I see artists who will hit a particular career wall and go, I put out releases, I do this, I do this, I do this. How do I get to the next level? How do I get, even within the middle class of my, yes, I want to make a good amount of income and be able to have a full-time job as an artist and not have to take some day job. But the how, right, works around, maybe you need someone who's just looking at making sure all your royalties are set up, that you're all set up and your catalogs are up to date, and somebody's inputting data and metadata into the MLC database, or wherever you'd have to go to make sure your data is all up to date, right?
I think artists also, they take the DIY thing way too far, do it yourself. I think Nashville, as one of our primary music cities, they will say the music city, but they are so good at this, supporting each other. I was always so amazed when I get to Nashville and see like, oh, wow, they have clubs and groups and people can go to meet them. Wow. That's not easy to find in other places always, but I think joining communities and realizing, like, just women in music, join us. It's $75. We love men too per
Yeah.
year. And get on the Google group. You'd be amazed. Like, hey, I need a lyric video. Hey, I need a bookkeeper. Hey, I'm traveling to Paris and I would love to meet up with some interesting people in music. Anything you want is one question away via email. So I think getting into community, I think one thing artists are not so great at as well is remembering that other artists are also your community. And so instead of like judging or hating or thinking like feeling a little jealous because they have or they don't have, or not liking their posts or hating their newsletters, and don't go there. Figure out some artists that you can collaborate with, work with, share resources with. Imagine if you just got yourself into a community with 5 other musicians, you wouldn't feel so alone.
Yeah. I think early on in my career, I learned the most that I learned from my fellow artists when they were like, oh, you haven't signed up for ASCAP? What's that? Or whatever it was at the time. Great question from our favorite Andrea Da Silva, one of our favorite people here. For Ariel, how do you select your clients? What are your baseline parameters? What is essential for an artist client to know when they seek out your services?
Okay, so we have 2 kinds of services at my agency. The PR services, how we select clients is first and foremost, I need to know I have a database where I can actually help you. So you might make music that I don't know the right journalists for, and I'm always very honest about that. Also, we are a foundational PR firm. If you are looking for Pitchfork, Good Morning America, Rolling Stone, I am not your girl. I don't know how to get PR at that level. We leave that to many other wonderful agencies. If you are in the category of medium to smaller emerging artists and you want to get your first 20, 30, 40 articles and insertions, I'm your girl. So foundational PR, small to medium. I don't do, as much as I wish I could call NPR and get you a tiny desk, I don't know how to do that. This is not my, actually, I know them, but I don't.
I was going to say, don't you?
So that's our place in the industry. And I've chosen that place for many reasons, mostly because I built a system that helps to scale. So that's our place. For the other side of the house, which is the strategy side of the house, what we're looking for is artists who have reasonable goals. So if you come to me and say, I want 1 million followers on social media, that maybe is a reasonable goal for another kind of agency. That's not what we do. If you are willing to roll up your sleeves and do the work and you want education with structure and hand-holding, that's what we do. Yeah. So I look for, are you someone who has time to put in, and would you work well with my people at my agency? So again, if you are making music that we don't understand how to market or relate to, I'm again going to be incredibly honest and say, I don't have the right tools for your type of music. But
I
mo-
also,
yeah, mostly I'm looking for mindset. If you come to me and you say, I'm overwhelmed, I hate it, I hate social media, I hate writing newsletters, I can't, I won't, I can't, I'm not your girl. I can't do everything for
sure.
you as much as I want to, and as much as I empathize with, I know how terrible and painful it is to have to confront it all. So we're looking for what we call thinking partners at my agency.
Yeah. But I love how you do approach. Sorry. Yeah.
No, that's it.
As I say, I love how you do approach working with artists on that strategy side. And, I remember when you were saying that you sort of interview your artist, you find out about things that are outside of the box so that you can go and promote in those areas. Like if you have an artist who's a vegan, who loves climate change, who, you actually pitch them into places that aren't about music. It could be a community that
Yes.
blogging about being a vegan or climate change, and then you find out the other pieces to that artist and the characteristics that sits sort of outside of music. So it's not always about pitchfork and it's going into other areas and being in vegetarian times or whatever. So
And that is one of the beautiful things about social media, right? If you're really into running, or you're totally into traveling, or you're a total bookworm and you love reading biographies, these are all angles, and there's groups and communities all over the internet to join. And I call that being a shark in a sea of tuna. Oh wow, there's a musician here in our reading group. That's cool.
Another one, folks.
You always have to remember, like,
tuna, yes.
when you swim in a pool with just only musicians all the time, you forget that what you do is special and unique and amazing to other people.
Yeah, it is true. Tom, are we at time? I'm going to, let's see, do we, yes. So I want to keep talking to Miss Ariel. I really, really do. You've been amazing. And thank you so much for all of this. There's so many good nuggets and golden nuggets here that you've said through this wonderful sit down chat with you here. So you are fabulous. You are amazing. The effervescent Ariel Hyatt, folks. Applaud, applaud, applause.
Everyone, it's so nice to see so many names of people that I've known for many, many years. And thank you for the opportunity. I really, really appreciate it, Tom.
Let me say on behalf of the entire Adorian audience, what an amazing exercise this has been for us too. Neeta, fantastic guidance through this conversation. We got a great glimpse at who she is as a woman and as a leader, and then as a PR professional. And I can't thank you enough to both of you for sharing your time and your wisdom with us. So thank you. I told the audience that you would leave more inspired than you arrived. I think that's an amen to that, right? To the audience, please keep coming back. We'll be back here next week. And I also put something in the chat earlier, and that is the live Who Knew events, which Neeta spoke at a couple of years ago, returns to City Winery in Nashville on March 30th. Stay tuned for more details on that. But folks, with that, please be nice to everyone, get a shot, and carry on.
Amen.